You may not be able to hear me. His microphone was bigger. In living memory, that is to say, within the month, a grown man, not only a published but highly honored, and not only highly honored but a board-certified poet, I won't say mentioned, I won't say declaimed, because the former smacks of the tossed off and offhanded, and the latter of some full-court press of the political. Neither will I say declared, for that supposes assertion. And allowed won't do, or admitted, because, let's face it, nobody asked, and we were too polite to have accused. So let's just say said. Said that Helen Vendler had never taken any notice of his poetry, that he'd been around years, his dues all paid up, was, as all of us are till we aren't, a survivor, despite which Mrs. Vendler had never, not once, reviewed a single one of his 3/4 dozen books of poetry, his several hundred poems, or many thousands of lines. A grown man, and a decent one, a guy who'd pass muster in any circle, a civilized man, a literate one, a fellow whose good opinion one wouldn't mind having his own self, who might put in a word here, a suggestion there, bring the news of one, I mean, from X to City Hall. Not crying understand, not tearing his hair or rending his garments. Perfectly control understand. A thorough gentleman about it, and only this wistful, dignified, almost resigned quality about his blown chances and missed opportunities. As though, by not even speaking ill of him, Mrs. Vendler had managed to hurt him to the quick. As though, that is, by her failure to take his measure, he had already been provided with an exact vocabulary by which he could take his own. His remark about not making the cut was casual, if not amused, and at least generous, rather like a humiliating story one tells on oneself. He was, well, devastated. And I thank my God, my defective genes, and my lucky stars that I am only a novelist and not a poet. Because Helen claims to know nothing about novels. That novel-wise, she's strictly a bimbo. That she won't touch a novel with a 10-foot pole, a 12-foot one, the tallest totem in Alaska. Well, I don't believe her, of course. She probably reads 3 to my 2, and like my poet friend, I feel at least a little caught short by my failure to come under the withering scrutiny of her solar intelligence. When she takes to reviewing fiction, I shall take to discontinuing the newspapers and canceling the magazines. Except, of course, Mrs. Vendler never withers and wields her immense critical judgment and influence with a benign, even benevolent neglect. This is the way, I think, with all great critics and teachers. They always take the high road, handle the beauties, however much easier and more tempting it is to slash and burn, to instruct by an aesthetics of the blemishes and pointed finger than ever to undertake to parse form, limn intelligence, and explain beauty. If then she has the power to thrust individual, even idiosyncratic talents forward by the brute force of her love for and knowledge of the art of poetry, she has too the brute human and intellectual decency to use her powers for good, even if, like some long-range, kindly Odyssean Midas, she must shut her ears against the pleas and wails of the less excellent, whose pitiable prayers are always, touch me, touch me, touch my dross. And always, inevitably, she exceeds. Through her wide empathy and her open 24 hours, we never close availability to her students and colleagues and friends. Through this proactive bread-in-the-bone gift she has for the art of friendship, too. And the greatest disease is friendship. I speak personally. She's been my pal since 1964, when I was this loutish, intimidated, ill-bred, raw-boned, token hayseed, Midwest visiting professor at Smith College. This emissary rotten apple to the Ivy League. And to the extent I could learn them, Helen undertook to teach me the forks in that country. Developed my eyes and ears, that is, for the sub-rosa snub, coached me like some WW2 spotter of enemy airplanes to recognize all the cool, high hand-eye coordination of the rude, stealthy cut. Would never have known what hit him otherwise. And drilled me to other of the niggling, snide caustics and sly condescensions of our mutual colleagues' snippy snippicities. I was let go in a year, but would, had they let me, have stayed on forever. Helen, on the other hand, was there 2 years, but wouldn't have stayed another 5 minutes. Because, understand, she's this Brahmin of the Democratic, who never developed a taste for the blood sports and other narrownesses of the heart and head. The lady is a gent, I think, and lives in this state of human grace. She has, by heart, the heart, I mean. And I've never known anyone so smart, so kind, or as distinguished, so, well, generously partisan on behalf of all of the rest of us. In her books and reviews, indeed, even in her conversation, Helen Vendler is a sort of pathologist. She knows the deep forensics of literature, and through her exquisite, possibly instinctive scholarship, has an uncanny ability to match up their poetic genetic markers with all the platonic goods and equivalencies, the very myths of the grand blue sky, the very verities of the good substantive earth. She is probably one of our greatest, most inspired readers. But hey, don't take my word for it. Because we've all of us our stats, our birth dates, the states we're from, our marital status and maiden names, where we went to school, who we married, or if. You could look it up. This is a kind of scholarship, too. I called the reference room. I asked them for Mrs. Vendler's entry in what my daughter used to call the hoo-hoo book. I wanted to lend this a little distance, a little objectivity, a skosh, a soupçon of the official, but personal, too. Personal as a CV. Data which might, in another context, have been inserted into a personal classified at the back of the free newspaper. MWM who'll never see 60 again. Interested in TV, movies, fine dining, nude strolls in front of the fireplace. Wishes to meet beautiful SWF, late teens, early 20s. From the hoo-hoo book, then. Slightly bowdlerized and reformatted to fit your TV screen. Can't even turn a page. Mrs. Vendler has taught at Cornell University, Smith, Boston University and Harvard, where she teaches today as Porter University professor. She has been the Overseas Fellow at Churchill College, Cambridge, and done stints at Haverford and Swarthmore Colleges, at Bordeaux, and for a semester was Hearst Professor in Creative Literature at Washington University. She is the author of many books: Yeats's Vision and the later plays, The Music for What Happens, On Extended Wings, the poetry of George Herbert, the odes of John Keats, and Part of Nature, Part of Us, and is the editor of both the Harvard Book of Contemporary American Poetry and Voices and Visions, the Poet in America. We're into the sidebars now. For several years she has done the long poetry reviews for the New Yorker, has been president of the MLA, a trustee of the English Institute, and serves on the Pulitzer Prize Board, the board of directors of the National Humanities Center. And oh, to hell with it. Go on. I can't go on. You must go on. I'll go on. She's a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, the American Academy of Arts and Letters, the American Philosopher's Society, the Norwegian Academy of Letters and Science, and blah, 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 blah. An AAU Fellow, Guggenheim Fellow, Fulbright Fellow, American something of Learned Society Fellow, etc., 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 blah, 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 blah. Go on. I can't go on. I'm eating my liver. Go on. I'll go on, but it's costing me. Mrs. Vendler has been awarded honorary degrees by Kenyon, Hartford, Union, Columbia, Marlborough, Washington U, Dartmouth, the University of Toronto, Smith, where she wouldn't have stayed another 5 minutes, and Trinity College, Dublin, like that. She has the Lowell Prize, the Explicator Prize, the Radcliffe Graduate Society Medal, and the National Book Critics Circle Award. She travels more than the Secretary of State, is consistently the greatest contributor to my soap collection, and has 28 lines in the Who Who book to my 26. I'm a few years older, but I've been sick. Helen Vendler, ladies and gentlemen.
It was all fiction, except the last part. There's no greater pleasure for me in life than coming back to where Stanley is. I've always regretted that we never again shared an office after that year at Smith, because I used to come into the office in the afternoons, and Stanley would have done his writing in the morning, and I would find in my typewriter a screed telling me what life had been yesterday, often the life I had led myself as well, only my life was nothing like Stanley's. He had seen everything.